Just when you thought the days of really slimy behavior from major record labels were completely dead and gone, hey guys, it's Steve from Featherlight Studio, and I want to officially welcome you to the wild, wild west of AI-based online creation tools. It has been a bumpy week in that world, especially the last couple of days, and especially for Udio users. For those of you that are unaware, and I can't think of many that would be, Udio is one of the largest online AI-based music creation platforms, much like Suno. Real quick, the long and short of it is that the world's largest record label, Universal Music Group, settled their case with Udio. Now, settle is different than a judgment. A judgment sets a precedence and a lot of other things. This just means that they came to an agreement basically out of court. And it's largely because UMG kind of backed Udio into a corner that they weren't likely to get out of. The whole thing started originally as a fair use argument, but that took a pretty quick turn when that case turned into more a data acquisition argument. How the actual data was obtained. Unlawfully obtaining the data became the foundation of that original court case, and then as that started to get more and more clear where that was going, I think Udio saw the writing on the wall. This isn't just Udio's problem, this is Suno's problem and Musicful and a lot of other people's as well. And even though it doesn't set a precedence, it's probably going to open a Pandora's box of other things in the future. Let's dive in and find out exactly what it means, who it affects the most. All right, so a little bit of backstory here real quick. Suno, Musicful, Udio, all these kinds of online creation tools have been a real resource for content creators and things, and that's been a boon of an industry generating billions of dollars for these companies. That got them into pretty quick legal hot water as the three largest record labels, UMG and Sony and Warner, all sued against these online content creation or AI-based content creation companies. At first, it started out as kind of a fair use argument, and that ship sailed probably quite some time ago with the whole concept of MP3s and stuff, so that wasn't really a terribly effective argument. But what was effective was their shifting gears and made it more about how the data was obtained in the first place. The case quickly turned into an unlawfully obtained argument, meaning they actually just ripped all this information off of online sources, and that's how they got their data to train their AI models. Well, that was a much more effective argument because the courts jumped all over that. Now, with UMG basically giving Udio an ultimatum, I think Udio in this particular case saw the writing on the wall and realized they really got backed into a corner and had nowhere to go, and they finally settled. Maybe more importantly is the fact that they've settled to create a different product altogether than the Udio you know and love. That ability for the upper tiers of their subscription models to have, commercial use protection and copyright protection and all that kind of stuff, that's not on that site anymore either, so none of that exists. And basically what they're saying by this settlement is that, buyer beware, use that stuff at your own risk. And there's gonna be quite a bit of risk because this is gonna set a standard. Whether it sets a precedent or not, that'll remain to be seen, but this is definitely gonna set a standard, and I think a lot of other companies are gonna jump on this same sort of coattail and see where it goes. All right, so let's talk about who this really affects. Who this affects the most, the people most impacted by this decision, clearly are going to be the subscription user base that already exists in the Udio universe. They're the ones by far and away that have been the most screwed over in this, especially those people who bought that service a year in advance to be able to take advantage of those discounts and things. Those people by far and away are the most impacted by this because the Udio that they bought into under those terms of service doesn't exist anymore. The new product that UMG and Udio are going to be creating isn't going to be very much like the old Udio at all. Those are the ones by far and away that not only are the most effective, they're the ones that got screwed out of that year's subscription tier. And more importantly, the higher end tools, the commercial use access and things like that, none of that exists any longer. And it doesn't take much scrolling on their site to see that this user base is more than pissed. There's a ton of examples and songs here, all dedicated to just how screwed they got from the settlement between Udio and UMG. In addition, having a major record label now dictating the terms of the very thing Udio users fought so hard to rail against, their own creations being controlled by a major music corporation. The situation with Udio really illustrates just how transient these online AI protections can be. Hey guys, if this kind of material appeals to you, or if this is helpful in any way, please remember to hit the subscription and notification bells, especially the like button, just because it helps the algorithm and it helps young channels like this. All right, let's talk a little bit about copyright and commercial use protection, since the previous terms of service advertised heavily that the top 2 subscription tiers would benefit from commercial usage rights and copyright protection. Well, those previous terms of service, that litigation, that argument doesn't exist any longer and has changed completely. It'll be a completely different terms of service when this new product, this new version of UMG/Udio is released. That protection, those commercial usage protections, don't exist anymore. The same thing is going to apply to that material you've created up till this point. So yeah, you could go back and download it if you got that window that allowed you to download your existing material, but buyer beware, because that material is not going to be protected in any way. Those commercial usage rights, they don't exist on their terms of service anymore. They don't exist anywhere. Neither does the copyright protections that they inferred if you were the top 2 subscription users. All right, so let's talk a little bit about who this actually benefits. Is this going to benefit the songwriters and performers and producers and things that existed on those original projects that this, AI data was used to train these models on? I think that's a stretch at best. It would be a massive understatement to say that those pre-existing artists already in Universal Music Group's catalog have complained many, many times about the ridiculously small amounts that streaming services and the revenue that generates actually trickles down to those performers and songwriters and producers, and optimistic at best. I think who's going to actually benefit from this the most clearly is going to be the record label and Udio. This is going to be an entirely different product altogether than the Udio that we've come to know and love, that online AI-based music creators have relied on to really bring professional music creation to the masses. I think that Udio is dead. And the hopes that it'll be revived in some sort of walled garden environment, sandbox environment, where they get to use some of those tools on a very limited basis in a very restricted environment, isn't going to apply to that crowd at all. Certainly the pissed off subscriber base that got tricked into buying that product earlier and then had it completely yanked out from underneath them and turned into a completely different product altogether are not going to jump on the bandwagon and support this. So I'm not exactly sure what demographic UMG and Udio are aiming at, but it's pretty clearly not going to be their existing subscriber base. So I'd really like to hear your opinions and thoughts on this, simply because so many of us out there, obviously use all kinds of different tools. We use complicated tools and AI-based tools for all kinds and all parts of the production process. It's not just people using AI to create everything that we're talking about here. AI is going to find its way into just about every part of the music production process, and it's only going to be a matter of time before the major DAWs out there start to adopt these technologies. We're going to see Chinese companies, training their own, offsite models and things that exist entirely in open source. All of that is going to start to play into this very complex and evolving picture. And I'd really be curious to find out what you guys think about that and how it's going to affect everybody. Like I said, not just the existing Udio user base, but music creators in all genres, mixers and producers and remixers and all of that. It's a big music world. We all need to benefit and use these tools. Seeing major labels jump in early like this and hope to get a big piece of the pie or sew up access to it completely, which I think is what's happening here with UMG, is a worrisome development at best, because it means that they see enough potential to actually jump in and put money behind it. I think that's probably a bigger indication than anything, is that when big, massive record labels that have a ton of weight to throw around jump in on this kind of stuff early, trying to sew it up and become the gatekeepers of AI-based technology, I think that should worry all of us. It just really smacks of the record labels just death grip on the complete industry back in the 90s and the 2000s. And to see that play out again, but digitally, is a worrisome thing indeed. Hey, if this was helpful in any way, please hit the subscription and notification bells. It really does help keep a young channel like this going and growing. Stay safe, be creative, create something, because the world could really use some creativity right now. We'll catch you guys in the next video.